E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā iwi, rangatira mā, tēnā koutou katoa. E te kāwana tianara o Aotearoa, tēnā koe. E ngā kai kōrero, minita Mahuta, minita Tinetti, tākuta Wiles. He mihi nui kia koutou katoa. He mihi hoki kia koutou kua hui hui mai nei ma te ipurangi ki te tautoko i te kaupapa whakahirahira, ko te rā whakanui i te wāhine. Nau mai, haere mai, piki mai. Ko Tupe Solomon-Tanoa'i tōku ingoa, no hāmoa me whiti o ku tīpuna. Tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. Warm greetings to our distinguished guests, Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, Governor-General of New Zealand, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, the Honourable Jan Tinetti, and Dr. Siouxsie Wiles. Welcome to those who are joining us online throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand, and a warm welcome to our friends joining us from across the Pacific. Talofa lava malole soifua maua malelangi e mama, kia orana, malo lelei, whakalofalahi atu, ni sambolvinaka, maloni. My name is Tupe Solomon-Tanoa'i, and I have the privilege of being your MC. The theme for today's event is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. And how fitting that we are reflecting on this theme via Zoom at an event which we've had to adapt in light of our changing environment. We are very fortunate to have an exciting lineup of speakers at this event, which is proudly brought to you jointly by UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand and the Zonta Club of Wellington. I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage all those who are joining us via the live stream to tell us where you're tuning in from and who is with you. Post it with the hashtags Zonta Club of Wellington, hashtag UN Women Aotearoa NZ, and hashtag IWD 2021. I now welcome Belinda Hemiona to start this occasion with a karakia. Belinda is a member of Zonta and is proudly of Ngāti Apa descent.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai ki tēnei whakanui. Ko rangitake te awa, ko kurahaupo te waka, ko Ngāti Apa ki Bulls tuku iwi, engare e tipu ake au ki kaikohe. Ko pare wānui me rātana o ku marae, ko Barry Barclay tuku papa, ko Sue James tuku mama, ko Belinda Hemiona tuku ingoa. Welcome whānau and wahine tour to our annual International Women's Day event. And thank you, Tupe, for that warm welcome to our day. I'm Belinda Hemiona, a member of the Wellington Zonta Club, and I have the real privilege of settling us into the events of this morning with a karakia. So let us begin. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ke uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga. Tihei Maōri ora. I now pass back to Tupe to continue our celebration for Women's Day. Thanks for joining everyone and enjoy your day.
Kia ora Belinda, and thank you for starting this event with a blessing. I now call upon Debbie G, President of the Zonta Club of Wellington, to give her opening address. Debbie is proudly of Kaitahu and Kati Mamwe descent.
E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā iwi, e rau rangatira mā, nau mai, haere mai, piki mai, tolofa lava, malawalele, kia orana, lisambulavanaka, aloha ni, namaste, ni hao, bonjour, buenos dias, salamat pagi, shalom, assalam alaikum, tēnā koutou, tēnā hui hui tātou katoa. Ngā mihi mahana kia koutou, ko Debbie G taku ingoa, ko Takitimu te waka, ko Aoraki te maunga, ko Kaitahu rawa ko Kati Mamu Moe o ko iwi. My name is Debbie G and I'm the president of the Zonta Club of Wellington. It's my honour and privilege to extend the warmest of welcomes to this 2021 International Women's Day breakfast on behalf of our club and our co-hosts, UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand. Special thanks to our distinguished speakers, Her Excellency Dame Patsy Reddy, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, the Honourable Jan Tinetti, and Dr. Siouxsie Wiles. Welcome to everyone watching us online this morning, women and men, boys and girls, people of all genders, races, ages and roles, whoever you are and wherever you are. Ngā tangata katoa. Greetings to other ministers and members of Parliament. Welcome to the New Zealand UNESCO Secretary General and the Chair of the National Commission. Special acknowledgements to our overseas dignitaries, ambassadors and high commissioners and their staff and families based in Aotearoa, including those joining us this morning from breakfast events being hosted at the United States and Indonesian embassies. New Zealand is the first country in the world to celebrate International Women's Day, and this year is a particularly important one. As countries and communities start to slowly recover from COVID-19 and to seek to establish the so-called new normal, we have opportunities. The opportunities to break down the historic cultural and socio-economic barriers to women taking their seat at the decision-making table. The opportunity to make resources and power more equitably distributed. The opportunity to make real change. Zonta International is a global organisation of executives and professionals working together to advance the status of women through service and advocacy. Zonta envisages a world in which women's rights are recognised as human rights and every woman is able to achieve her full potential. In such a world, women have access to all resources and are represented in decision-making positions on an equal basis with men. In such a world, no woman lives in fear of violence. Zonta was founded in 1919 in Buffalo, New York, and has its headquarters in Chicago. We have over 28,000 women, men, and gender diverse members spread over more than 1,100 Zonta clubs in 62 countries. The name Zonta is derived from a Sioux Nation word meaning honest and trustworthy, and Zonta's symbol is a yellow rose. Today, March 28th, is also Zonta Rose Day, a time to reflect on progress made and to call for change. In recognition of this, we'll be sending yellow Zonta roses to all our Wellington-based speakers and making a donation to Dr. Siouxsie Wiles' lab. In New Zealand, Zonta has been active for more than 50 years and has 28 clubs from Northland to Otago. The Zonta Club of Wellington was the second to be founded in New Zealand after Auckland. It was chartered on May 19th, 1969 and has nearly 60 members. Zonta members, also known as Zontians, volunteer their time and talents for many service projects locally, nationally and internationally, and new members are always welcome. As a member of a Zonta club, you can make a real difference to women and girls locally, nationally and globally. You can contribute to your community in a rewarding and enjoyable way, create friendships and network with other members locally and globally, and develop personal skills and leadership opportunities. If that sounds like you, you'll find our clubs listed on the Zonta International website. Let me conclude by thanking the fantastic team of volunteers from the Zonta Club of Wellington and UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand on organising committee for this event. You worked tirelessly, collaboratively and very professionally to make this event a success, including making sure we had a workable and well-tested Plan B in place. You have made both of your clubs very proud and very grateful. So once again, welcome to this celebration and please enjoy our inspiring lineup of speakers. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Debbie, for those words of welcome. And thank you to those who have posted online already. A special hello and good morning to the women of the Anglican Women's Studies Centre, Dress for Success Northland, and women joining us from Parimata, Mangere, and also Te Aro, who have posted with the hashtags, #Zonta Club of Wellington, #UN Women Aotearoa NZ and hashtag IWD 2021. Before we proceed with our program, I would like to acknowledge the Honourable Jan Tinetti, Minister for Women, for her support of today's event. We look forward to hearing from the Minister later this morning. It is now my honour to introduce our first speaker, a woman who has worked tirelessly to serve New Zealanders in business, governance and the arts throughout her career. She is also the patron of UN Aotearoa New Zealand and has been an avid supporter of this event during her term as Governor-General. We are fortunate to hear her insights as she enters the last year of her term. Please welcome Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, Governor-General of New Zealand.
I ngā mana, I ngā reo, I ngā wahine toa o te wā, tēnā koutou. Tēnei aku mihi nui ki a koutou. Kia ora tātou katoa. I'm really delighted to be with you all today to mark International Women's Day 2021. And I thank Zonta Club of Wellington and UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand for their hard work in ensuring that this is a live event, albeit a virtual one. With so many events having been cancelled or postponed last week, I'm really very pleased that we can still celebrate this special day together. Change has certainly been the hallmark of our last 12 months. We've all been forced to live, work and relate in new ways. It hasn't always been pleasant or desirable, but we've adapted surprisingly quickly. We're all now accustomed to wearing masks, and using the COVID Tracer app has become a way of life for most of us. It may feel like we don't have so much to celebrate here today, but there are glimmers of light here and there. Globally, the relative success of women leaders in responding to the pandemic has been something of a talking point. For example, it's been reported that countries governed by female leaders have experienced far fewer COVID-19 deaths per capita. That's a great start, but I suggest that this media coverage was perhaps a little simplistic, given the many and complex factors affecting the pandemic performance of individual nations. After all, being a woman does not in itself confer magical pandemic fighting abilities. But what the research done so far has confirmed is that the more egalitarian a nation and the more attention paid to issues of social equality, the more likely it is to have weathered the COVID crisis well. What matters more than the gender of the leader is a country's culture, and those with more egalitarian societies generally tend to do better during crises. All the more reason to keep the pressure on for gender and cultural equality in Aotearoa. Unfortunately, for all the success enjoyed by women in national leadership roles, COVID has had a disproportionately negative effect on women in the workforce. Indeed, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel used her speech yesterday to mark International Women's Day in Germany to warn that the pandemic is endangering progress made on gender equality there, as women take on the lion's share of childcare in lockdown and are more likely to lose work in at-risk jobs. Globally, women represent 39% of the workforce, but have borne 54% of the COVID-19 job losses. Last year, Statistics New Zealand noted that women in employment had fared significantly worse here in the wake of COVID-19. A shocking finding was that in the June quarter last year, of the 11,000 jobs lost, 10,000 of them belonged to women. Now, it's possible that this figure isn't completely accurate due to lockdown disrupting the collection of data. But even allowing for underreporting, the effect on women's employment was clear. Some of this can be ascribed to the types of jobs affected by the pandemic, specifically the closure of our international borders and our lockdowns, and of course the service sector, which includes sales, hospitality, tourism, domestic care and cleaning, was the hardest hit, and women make up a large proportion of those workforces. COVID-19 has amplified existing inequities in our system and it's become apparent that the types of work more commonly undertaken by women make them more vulnerable. Well, are there any upsides to this crisis? A report released last year by NZ Global Women includes a reflection on opportunities for positive change that can come out of crises. As author Ava Wardecki pointed out, change can manifest in different ways. Some crises have been the building blocks for progression of women's roles and rights, while others have acted as a wrecking ball. For instance, the 20th century world wars were watersheds for women's inclusion in the workforce, both here and in other allied nations, and thus began a small but significant shake-up of traditional family roles. So this pandemic era can signal either a reversal or a new beginning. It's up to us to keep the issue of gender equity and equality at the forefront as we rebuild our economy and our society to make our nation stronger and more sustainable. With my term coming to an end later this year, this is the last time I'll speak at the International Women's Day breakfast as Governor General. So I thought I'd look back at the first speech I gave at this event in 2017. At that time, we were ranked 9th highest on the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Index. And later that year, we saw a drop in our own official gender pay gap from 12% to 9.4%. But at that time, we only had one female chief executive of a New Zealand top 50 company. And in the private sector, women made up only 17% of board members and held only 20% of senior management roles. Fast forward to this year, 2021, and I'm afraid the story is not markedly different. We're now 6th on the Global Gender Gap Index, but our most official gender pay gap figure remains pretty much unchanged. And worryingly, this is contradicted by the analysis done by national remuneration consultant Strategic Pay, who calculated that as at September 2020, the gap was in fact 17.2%, nearly double the official figure. I suspect that's weighted to the private sector, but nonetheless, it is a worrying difference. There is good news on the number of women CEOs of New Zealand top 50 companies. There are now 3. And the number of women on private sector boards has been increasing, albeit it's still slow. And of course, the Parliament elected in 2020 is the most diverse and therefore most representative we have ever had. As I noted 4 years ago, where the private sector has lagged, the public sector has been doing sterling work in promoting gender equality in leadership positions, and this is continuing. So change has been happening, but the pace is still far too slow. My personal observation after 4 decades in the workforce is that we've now reached a tipping point in female empowerment, but we need to cement this position so that it is recognised as the status quo. We cannot let this slip. Even with the extra challenges of COVID, we mustn't step back. We mustn't allow COVID to be our wrecking ball. There is so much more work to be done. Kia ora hui hui tātou katoa. Thank you.
Oh, excuse me, I was muted just then. Dame Patsy, on behalf of UN Women, Zonta, and all those joining us online, thank you for sharing those thought-provoking reflections on the impact of COVID-19 on women's employment, the types of inequities in our system, and the reminder to keep gender equity at the forefront in the economic recovery. As March 8th is also Zonta Rose Day, please accept as a token of our appreciation yellow Zonta roses, which will be making their way to Government House shortly. I now have the honour of introducing our next speaker, but as we have been, we had been experiencing some issues at Parliament, but I'm very pleased to see that our next speaker is on the line with us. A woman who has blazed a trail over 20 years of what she calls flax root politics. She has made history as the first woman and the first wahine Maori to hold the Foreign Affairs portfolio. She is also Minister of Local Government and Associate Minister for Maori Development. I now invite the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta to make her remarks.
E ngā mana e ngā reo e ngā karangatanga maha tēnā koutou. Tēnei e whai ake nei I tō tātou nei kāwana tiana rei I roto I te nākau whakaiti. Nō reira, koutou e tāpiri mai, kia are ngā taringa ki ngā kaupapa e pāne ki a tātou nei wahine, puta nui te ao, tēnā koutou katoa. Firstly, can I acknowledge our Governor-General, the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, and your contribution to today's theme for International Women's Day. I also want to acknowledge our hosts, UN Women of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the Zonta Club of Wellington for the kind invitation to join today's forum. I thought I would start with some real life contributions. Firstly, COVID has taught us a lot, but when I reflect on the practical lived experience of a generation who will refer to this time, it will, I guess, and I'm thinking of my children, it will teach us what we needed to call on to be more resilient and patient with a global pandemic impacting our country in ways that we really hadn't thought about before or ever experienced before. I want to acknowledge my ministerial colleagues who are joining the call, but in particular our Minister of Women's Affairs, the Honourable Tinetti, because as we experienced many of the challenges making our decisions last year going into this year, some of those considerations inevitably informed us how women and children would be impacted, whether it was during the 4-week lockdown and resetting the way in which education was delivered, the increased response of our services, especially in relation to domestic violence, or at a service level, the way in which our women mobilised and participated with our health providers and our community providers to be able to support an on-the-ground response. Throughout the whole country, we have seen women participate at the forefront of community leadership in order for us to work our way through the challenge of COVID-19. And then on the business side, as businesses were impacted, a number of our small to medium enterprises have a profile of which are made up of women. I certainly know that that is the case for the Māori economy, and many of our businesses had to think about whether or not they would hibernate or pivot in particular sectors such as tourism. But all the way through that, the resilience of women, I believe, has shown the type of leadership that will be required to build an economic and a social recovery. I'm really pleased because the conversations that I've been participating in, both globally and domestically, have leaned in to the opportunity that we have around an economic recovery that is inclusive, that ensures that women are a part of that resilient recovery, and the profile of that recovery across business, across our health workforce, across our community are so essential to what's required to get us all through this. We're not there yet, and this year will significantly be the year of a vaccination rollout. But as a country who has long championed gender equality and women's equality, we've also not dropped our eye to the challenge of ensuring that in specific sectors of the workforce, we want to respond and ensure that women's work is recognised. Now, in our parliament, we've got about 48% of our, across parliament, of our representation of women, and in government in particular, 55%. So I know from a perspective drawn from the profile of our demographics in the parliamentary setting, there are a number of issues that we can respond to because we have women who are out there in our community and connecting to the issues of the day. Can I also acknowledge our leaders in domains that have really critically influenced the way we think about the COVID-19 response. I think about our scientists, our epidemiologists. We've got Dr. Siouxsie Wiles on the in the breakfast and speaking later, and many others in the medical profession who have participated in communicating what it's going to take to ensure that we have got a not only a strong response, but a response that is well understood by the community. And if I can reflect on the way in which women's leadership has really helped New Zealand's response, it's the importance of communicating to our people to ensure that they understand what is happening and what we need to do proactively as a whānau or as a community or as a country to be able to respond effectively. And communication during this period of our experience has been absolutely critical. We're the hosts of APEC this year, and part of that responsibility is to try and ensure that the conversations that international economies are having makes way for inclusive economic recovery, as I referred to earlier. And so I'm really confident that as we make way for themes within APEC, such as increasing inclusion and sustainability for recovery, we're also opening up the opportunity to delve more deeply into the profile of economies and how they could work more specifically with women and their participation in economic recovery to build greater resilience. I'm excited about that because we have got our first woman who is leading the WTO, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and she signals, in my mind, a very proactive opportunity for women and women's voice and women's participation, not only to be recognised, to be at the forefront of a COVID-19 economic recovery. So with those brief words, I thought that International Women's Day absolutely is an opportunity for us to reflect on the legacy of achievements within our own country. Kate Shepherd and Mere Mangakahia, who championed the right of women to vote. But when I think about the legacy of leadership that influenced me, I think about Te Puiahirangi, Dame Whenakupa, Iriaka Rātana. I think about Dame Te Ariki Nui Te Atairangi Kahu and the range of their advocacy for women, for children, for the environment, for our role in our whānau and in society to be able to cast out an intergenerational vision for well-being. And I feel so proud. I feel so proud about that. So can I lastly thank everybody on a day-to-day basis who are making the types of changes to ensure that we are a more resilient society, but also giving hope when there are a number of challenges, real-life challenges in our community where often women are also at the centre. And to my own community, were it not for the women participating in a number of our community social service and health providers, I don't think we would get the strong emphasis and focus on whānau wellbeing that we have had during these unprecedented times. Nō reira, he iti taku iti, kia tāpiri atu ki tēnei o ngā kaupapa e pāne ki ngā āhuatangi mō a tātou nei wahine. Ahakoa kōwai, ahakoa nōwhia. I just wanted to acknowledge each and every one of the women and lift up the many women who are leading in all places and spaces to be able to ensure that we can go forward confidently together. Tēnā tātou.
Tēnā koe te minita mō tō kōrero, ngā mihi nui ki a koe. On behalf of Zonta and UN Women, thank you, Minister, for your time this morning and your work to support the aspirations of people from all walks of life, including increasing inclusion, building sustainable economies, and resilient communities. As a sign of our gratitude, yellow Zonta roses will be making their way to the beehive shortly. Our next speaker is the Honourable Jan Tinetti. Over her 20-year career in education, she has advocated at a national level for equal educational opportunities, and she is currently the Minister of Internal Affairs, Minister for Women, and Associate Minister of Education. I now invite the Honourable Jan Tinetti to say a few words.
Tuhia ki te rangi, tuhia ki te whenua, tuhia ki te nāka o ngā tangata. Ko te mea nui, ko te araha, tihei Maōri ora. Kia ora koutou, and thank you for having me here this morning, and thank you for that introduction. I'd like to acknowledge Zonta International and UN Women for this wonderful event today, and acknowledge you for overcoming the technological issues and still being able to bring us here together. I think it's wonderful that we're here on International Women's Day and just taking this time to celebrate women. Every day should be a day to celebrate women, but it's especially great to be here this morning doing this, to have this big celebration. I'd like to acknowledge Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, my parliamentary colleagues and members of the diplomatic community for being here. Thank you for giving up your time to be here this morning. I'm excited as Minister for Women to be here on my first International Women's Day. As I said, it's a great day to be celebrating women. I'm really excited for what potential we have to achieve for women this year, and we've already started with a bit of a hiss and a roar. With my other hat on as Associate Minister of Education, we recently announced that from June this year, all primary, secondary and kura schools will have the opportunity to offer free period products out to all of their students, their young female students in their school. This is a great initiative, and as you said in the introduction, I am a previous educator. I strove for equity in education, and it was wonderful to have this opportunity to be part of a government that is really committed to reducing the barriers to a wonderful education for all our students in our whānau. The theme of this year's celebration, we've heard it here this morning so many times, Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in the COVID-19 World. All of our speakers so far have talked about the fact that COVID-19 has highlighted disparities between women and men in our societies. But we've put people at the heart and centre of our health response, which means that the economic shocks haven't been as great as what we have seen in previous economic shocks. We know that women's employment has been disproportionately impacted though, and that during lockdowns, as we've heard already here this morning from Dame Patsy Reddy, much of the essential work and domestic and childcare responsibilities was carried out by women. So first of all, I want to thank you who are here this morning joining us for your contribution. I particularly want to recognise the unpaid work that you have done and the often unrecognised work in the home. Also the work that you have done in supporting communities by looking after the most vulnerable and leading your families through the juggle of work, home life and homeschooling. You are doing the most essential work. COVID is following similar employment patterns in previous economic shocks, whether it be events like the GFC or Christchurch earthquake. We've seen this pattern happen before. And as I've said, this government will continue with our strong health response and getting our people back to work by putting people at the centre of what we do. This has already cushioned the economic blow for everyone. Having said that, this disruption is an opportunity to build back better so that women are less vulnerable in the labour market shocks of the future. In saying that, in our theme today about leadership in the COVID-19 world, women leaders are pivotal in this driving change. and making certain that we ensure better outcome for women in our COVID-19 recovery planning. Women were and continue to be part of the strong response to COVID-19. We've already heard the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta talk about our strong response of our scientists, but also our health professionals, and women were a high proportion of essential workers on the front line. I particularly want to thank our guest here this morning, Dr. Siouxsie Wiles. I'm a bit of a fangirl, but your leadership and your clear communication was exceptional. I also have a little bit of a personal story in that I first met you, Dr. Siouxsie Wiles, in about 2014 when I brought my Decile 1 kids to listen to a talk that you gave in Tauranga. And I have to tell you that I had one wee 5-year-old there who was absolutely taken with you, and now as a 12-year-old has dreams of being a scientist because of you. Your inspiration is an inspiration to every young girl and woman in this country. So thank you for all that you do. As we plan our recovery, my focus is on how we can build back better for women, for employment, and for supporting families and communities. Many sectors, organisations, and government departments are trying to improve gender equality in the workforce. We have already achieved so much as a government, things like extending paid parental leave from 18 to 26, increasing paid parental leave by up to $20 a week. We've passed equal pay legislation and delivering record pay settlements for female-dominated workforce. And we're reducing the gender pay gap in the public sector. Already, as I said, achieving some great things. But we know, as the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta said, we have more to do, and we're committed to that work. We want to make sure that we are achieving great things for all women across this country. I look forward to working with you as we develop our initiatives and improve lives for women and girls in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you for your time today, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the morning. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Minister, for your support of this event and the work that you have been doing to empower women in New Zealand and to put women at the heart of the COVID-19 response. Yellow Zonta roses are on their way to you also as a token of our thanks. Our next speaker joins us from Auckland and is a woman who really needs no introduction, given that she's one of New Zealand's most recognisable scientists, thanks to her regular media appearances, providing clear and helpful advice to New Zealanders during the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, Dr. Siouxsie was named as the supreme winner of the New Zealand Women of Influence Awards. I now invite Dr. Siouxsie Wiles to take the floor.
Kia ora, and thank you so much for the invitation to present today, and also just acknowledge the amazing women that are here, the ones who have done all the organising, and my fellow speakers. And Jan, I'm really taken by your story, and I think what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about what drives me now actually is those stories of being told that young women and girls are seeing me as an inspiration, is that I don't want them to have to experience what I have experienced throughout my career and what I continue to experience. So I'm going to be a bit ranty today because we've got a lot of things that we need to fix, and I'm going to focus a little bit on the things that I'm experiencing, but fully acknowledge, all of the things that our previous speakers have said around, how this is impacting on women in different ways. So I actually am taking opportunity of us being online to use a few little visual aids. So hopefully I can share my screen with you all. And then if you just give me a moment. So Dame Patsy stole my thunder, but I can actually show you her workings in terms of how this pandemic is impacting on women, but also how women have basically have really been leading in terms of the countries that are doing much better from the pandemic. So this is a question that I got asked a lot, as being by international media, as being from New Zealand, saying, you know, it looks like the countries led by women are doing a better job. You know, what do you think this is because of? Well, some researchers, this one was a group of people from the University of Reading, actually went out and did the research. So what they looked at was a data set of 194 countries that varied in lots of different ways, socioeconomically, all of these kinds of things. They matched countries to their nearest neighbors, looking at which countries were led by women and which countries were led by men, and basically showed that those countries that were led by women systematically did better, at least at this part in the pandemic, which was a little bit earlier on. And they looked at why that might be, and basically speculated that it was to do with the fact that the countries led by women actually responded faster and more effectively in that early stage. So this is on a country-to-country level. The relationship even held if you took out countries like us or like the USA and the UK that are doing especially badly on the men leading side. That relationship still held. Another group of researchers then looked at the USA specifically, because obviously they have different states that are doing lots of things differently. And so they looked on a state-by-state basis whether this relationship held. And it did. So states that had women governors had fewer COVID-19 deaths compared to states with men governors. And they showed that, again, this relationship was due to the fact that states led by women tended to act strongly and much more quickly than the states led by men. What they also noted, though, was that, and so this comes to what one of the ministers was saying, in terms of how the women communicated and what they did, was that they expressed more empathy. So they very clearly lead in a different way. And this is one of the things that when I was asked by the media about this, I said that, you know, it's not an inherently womanly trait to be compassionate, to have empathy, but that does seem to be something that the women do have, and we would love it if the men had it too. So I think New Zealand is obviously in a quite different position in that we have both a woman Prime Minister, we have a woman as the Chief Science Advisor to the Prime Minister. There are women like me who have been really prominent in terms of communicating, but this is not how it is in most other places. And I found this really interesting quote, which was from a study carried out on media coverage to do with the pandemic, showing that men's voices are the ones that dominate. So when we look at who the experts are, we have women experts in infectious diseases all around the world, but the ones who are being presented in the media, with the exception of New Zealand, I think, and possibly Scotland, are mostly men's voices, apart from when they're talking about women's issues to do with childcare and things like that. And this imbalance is so important, right, for showing, you know, women playing the roles that they should be playing. So that sort of leads me to my my big reveal, which is a woman on here everyone will know, that people constantly underestimate us, undervalue us, and undermine us, both our contributions and our expertise. And they constantly question our motivations. So this is something that I have had, it's been really, I've been slapped in the face with it, I think. People thinking that I want to be famous, that I'm doing this to get attention, rather than that I have over 20 years of experience in infectious diseases, that I understand the research around how, you know, that communities that don't panic and that act together are the ones that, you know, and are well informed, that those are the communities that survive disasters like this the best. And so I made a conscious decision to use my skill set to help New Zealand get there. Somehow this is kind of construed as me, you know, wanting attention and things. And one of the things that I find really interesting is that as a woman, so I'm going to sort of speak specifically to my experience as a woman in science, but it wasn't until really recently that I realized that being a woman accounted for a lot of the trouble that I've had. So I obviously don't look like your usual run-of-the-mill scientist. And I've had kind of trouble throughout my entire career in terms of sort of being undermined and undervalued. And I often just thought it was about me. So not necessarily about me being a woman, but just about me being the package that is me. And it wasn't until, gosh, maybe something like 2014 when I had an interview for the job that I currently have, where the sexism like sort of hit me straight in the face. And that was that at this interview, a very senior man, he started this line of questioning around my suitability for the job that I was interviewing for by saying that my job, which is a lecturer at the university, is a very stressful job, and it can result in stresses put on relationships and lead to divorce. And so his question was, how could I ensure that my husband and my child, were not impacted by my getting this job? And I was blown away that a senior man thought it was appropriate to ask me this question in an interview in 2014. And I answered it by saying that, well, I'll handle that the same way my husband, who has the same job, does. Which wasn't really an answer, but it was I guess it gave the question the respect that it was due. And when I made a complaint about this question in my interview, because to me it signaled a bias against women. As I say, it was the first time I'd really been hit in the face with how my gender had kind of been, was being seen by others. I was told by a very senior person that I complained to that they were not, so I said it was an indication of unconscious bias, and I was told that this person was not aware of any unconscious bias in their section, which is basically the definition of unconscious bias. So this is what we face, is we face people in positions of leadership who actually do not understand that they are part of the problem. And it was also really brought back to me when I think about how at the University of Auckland, we have two leadership programs. So we have a women in leadership program, and then we have a leadership program. And the Women in Leadership program you apply to, and then it's run by the Equity Office, and it's all about empowering women and creating a network of women to support each other. But the leadership program is invite only. And when I look at who is invited to that leadership program, it gives me no confidence that anything's going to change, because the same people are supporting people who look like them, basically keeping this chain of us being underestimated and undervalued going. So this whole idea that we just need to wait, women like me need to wait until there's more women like me in senior levels, it's like, well, we're not being invited to those leadership programs. Anyway, so that's sort of something I feel like we really need to resolve. The irony, of course, being that when women deal with women's, when women push for equality, we're penalized for it, whereas when men push for equality, it gives them an extra boost because they're seen as being kind of amazing, doing this incredible work. So it's like we're just being attacked on every side. But what I do want to raise a little bit is just what happens when women do step up and do these positions of leadership. And so this is something I think we're going to have to, this is a place where I'm going to put my attention, I think. So a week ago today, as we were moving into, as we were in level 3 here in Auckland, the breakfast show on TVNZ asked myself and Sean Hendy, Professor Sean Hendy, to go on and do a double header interview. And we essentially said the same things. We were talking about how we were in this really early stages of this outbreak. And so what we didn't know, if there had been these super spreader events, we could see an exponential growth in cases over the next few days. And that, the more cases we have, the more chances are that somebody could die. And Sean talked a little from the modelling perspective about, how this sort of was backed up. And then this clip was put on social media, and it was such an eye-opener, because myself as an expert in infectious diseases with, 20 years of experience, and Sean Hendy as a physicist, all of the rage was pointed at me. You can't see it anymore because people's tweets have been either deleted or stopped, but essentially I was the one who had no experience, who was just the pink-haired clown, all of this kind of stuff. Whereas the physicist, Sean, was obviously the serious one who knew what he was talking about. Which brings me to my last little page. So this here is just a selection of the abuse that I am getting. These are all things that are put on Facebook in response to a national MP calling me a COVID celebrity, and not spending enough time reflecting on what it means to be at a university rather than doing all of the stuff that I do, that I'm dangerously arrogant. And everything here is either to do with my appearance or the fact that I have no academic integrity, I'm a joke, I'm a mental case. This is what happens when women stand up and use their, use their expertise to do what's needed. And this, to me, gets in the nub of what we have to resolve, because I do not want empowering, and I do not want younger women empowering. We are empowered enough. What we need is people to stop cutting us down when we are using our expertise to do what's necessary to get the country through a crisis or any of these kinds of things. And I guess this isn't my area of expertise. So this is where we need to go to the experts who understand how we deal with this kind of stuff. But the fact that there is a national MP who is happy to leave all of this stuff on his Facebook page, that they are not even doing the courtesy of going through and either saying that comments like this aren't appropriate or stopping it. This is what we get when we stand up and speak in public. So it doesn't surprise me when people say they don't want these leadership roles, because we've created this toxic environment that allows people to basically try and cut us down. So I think my final, reflection, so I feel like we need to do this. We need to sort this out somehow, going to the experts who know how to sort this out. But we should use COVID-19, I think, as the boost that we can do this. So if you had asked me over a year ago whether we would have shut our borders and gone into this most incredible lockdown, one of the strictest in the world, I would have thought you were mad, right? But we did it. We came together and we made really, really drastic change for the greater good. So we should use that as an exemplar of what we can do when we come together and we think about others. And so I would hope that we use this example to say we can do this. Nothing is too hard. We can make really drastic action. And so why would we not do this to resolve all of the things that we know are wrong and that made us vulnerable to this pandemic in the first place? And that I will stop sharing my screen and say thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Siouxsie, for sharing your impassioned message about what drives you. And thank you for sharing your experiences and your desire to see a different world and a more inclusive environment for the women and girls who wish to pursue a career in science or any position of leadership. So as a sign of appreciation for speaking today and all the work that you do, Zonta and UN Women have made a donation to the Bioluminescent Superbugs Lab. Thank you. I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge that there are 300 community groups, families, schools, and individuals who have joined us on the live stream this morning. I'd just like to say hello to a few of them: Kiwirail Wellington, Rural Women New Zealand, Stats New Zealand Women's Network, Women and Family in Takapuna, Wellington, Aotearoa, and even Colorado, USA, Soroptimist International of Aotearoa, New Zealand, Taiwanese Women's Association of New Zealand, Auckland's North Shore Zonta Club, Tamaki Makaurau, TEU Women joining from Wellington, Martin Hartis Foundation Trust, Men's Health Trust New Zealand, United Nations Association of New Zealand. So to those of us joining us, if you have been inspired by the words of wisdom from our speakers, and if like me, you are feeling motivated to take action to empower women around you, then please share your thoughts with the hashtags that you see here. I would now like to invite Suzanne McNabb, President of UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand, to say some words to close our event.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ina mana, ina reo, ina wahine toa, e ro rangatira mā, Nā mihi mai aha ki a koutou, ko Suzanne McNabb aho, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. As speakers, we didn't have the opportunity to hear what everyone else was going to say. So you will hear some things, obviously, that have been said before, but that doesn't matter. Achieving an equal future in a COVID-19 world. What a challenge this is for us all. Achieving an equal future is challenge enough. Achieving that in a COVID-19 world demands much of each and every one of us. As we know and have heard this morning, women are at the front lines of the COVID-19 crisis, whether as healthcare workers, caregivers, researchers, scientists, or community organisers. Women are some of the most effective national leaders in combating the pandemic. The pandemic crisis has highlighted both the importance of women's contributions as well as the disproportionate impacts on women. In some countries, COVID-19 has pushed back some of the hard-won gains, exacerbated existing discrimination, and created new barriers for women. Women have taken on an even greater share of the unpaid and caring work in this time of crisis. Sadly, violence against women has surged, and women, including in Aotearoa, have been disproportionately affected by unemployment, as we heard. So our challenge is profound. Despite the crisis, we have to find ways of continuing to push for lasting gender equality for all women, not leaving any groups of women behind. We have to make sure the crisis does not become an excuse to reverse the positive gains that have been achieved. And we have to continue to support our women leaders and empower our young women to step up and be leaders too. As the United Nations entity for gender equality and the empowerment of women, UN Women is constantly evolving and finding new ways to achieve its mission, reach more women, and bring change to their lives. UN Women's programs focus on 4 significant areas: economic empowerment of women, political empowerment and leadership, eliminating violence against women, and responding with a gender perspective in times of disaster, as well as ongoing policy and legislative work. UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand supports global programs in the Pacific and works towards gender equality in Aotearoa. So what can we do? We can continue doing some of the amazing things we have been doing, and we can do more. We can take a fresh look at what we have been doing to ensure it is the most effective we can be. We can support women leaders, those who have put themselves in the spotlight. And I wrote that before I heard what Siouxsie had to say. We need to support women like Siouxsie. We can enlist the support of our friends, of the men and boys in our lives. We can promote the tools we have, such as the UN Women's Empowerment Principles, to work for gender equality. You, every one of you tuning into this session, can be part of it. You can work for the empowerment of women. Of course, you can join UN Women, but most of all, you can commit to gender equality and achieving an equal future, not in another 100 years, but now. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Finally, I have the privilege of extending the final thanks to the great many people, mostly women, who have worked hard to make this International Women's Day a significant occasion. We thank the Governor-General, Her Excellency Dame Patsy Reddy, also patron of UN Women, Aotearoa in New Zealand, so thank you for that too, Dame Patsy, Minister Nanaia Mahuta, Minister Jan Tinetti, and Dr. Siouxsie Wiles for their inspiring words. And a very special thanks to the UN Women and Zonta women of the working group, who have had to have multiple plans and multiple levels of adaptability. Thanks too to all the groups and individuals who've joined us via the live streaming. To paraphrase Amy Rees Anderson, we need to see strong women. We need to be strong women. We need to raise strong women. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Suzanne. And thank you to everyone for your participation this morning. I hope you leave with some wonderful insights and renewed energy to do what you can to achieve an equal future in a COVID-19 world. If you would like to view the Prime Minister's message for International Women's Day, please go to the Facebook pages of UN Women, Aotearoa New Zealand, and the Zonta Club of Wellington. If you want to learn more about these two organisations, the work they do and how to support them, information will be available at the end of this live stream. I now have the pleasure of closing this event in the Pacific way in my heritage language of Samoan. I will now give thanks that our gathering has concluded well and to ask for God's blessings on each and every one of us throughout our movements today. Tātou te talo. Lo matou te mai o ele langi. Whawhatai oi umale manuia la matou mafutanga nei. Whaamanuia mai a te I matou ta I tuatasi. Ia tu maupea le anganga pa ia. I lunga o a matou la asanga uma. I lo suafa pa ia. Amene. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Enjoy your day, keep safe, and watch the space for next year.